mic, and I do dumb shit like mute my mic, you know, because I'm like can't do everything else. Can't do I can't do anything right. Um, but sometimes I do get things right. But here we go. I thought I was going to make this thing scroll here, but here we go. Just show this here. Example banners, comments here. So if anybody ever shows up, I'll have a chat. I might even invite people to come and do shit and whatever. But other people are going to be doing stuff, so we just got to keep it going. It's pretty much a given that that we're going to have a conversation, and it's not always going to make sense. I think that I've been having a lot of conversations in the last week that are associated with the things that I like to work on. I like to advocate for people that have difficulties in this world. Typically, people like myself that live with obesity, that live with diabetes and whatnot. And so I'm going to start it with a little bit of a serious talk. So serious talk. I was at the pharmacy yesterday, and due to technicalities, I think these things will get sorted out. And luckily, I'm a little bit ahead of the curve because my doctor, who is my bariatric specialist, told me to get ahead of it. I'm working on getting medication that is going to be in very short supply and already is in short supply. It's a medication called semaglutide. A lot of people know it as Ozempic. It helps me control my blood sugar to make sure that I am always in a safe range. As I have a myriad of conditions, and one of the ones I have causes a lack of sugar control. So that's kind of a start. To explain what's going on, and that's a medication that's made a lot of news recently because it can help people lessen their appetite. It controls a bunch of stuff in the body. I won't get into technical stuff because I don't have it in front of me, and I'm not a pharmacist, a doctor, or a chemical researcher that works on such things. But it's a thing that helps the body regulate things that that a lot of people with conditions like mine don't naturally have. So it's very popular. It's been very effective, and for some reason, the manufacturer's unable to bring it to market. They don't have enough. They don't have enough of the subcutaneous injectors. It sounds like, and so make a long story short, I'm gonna maybe try taking it with an oral dose. It's a very expensive medication. It's still not generically available, which is fine. Pharmaceutical companies need to make some money. They put a lot of R&D money in, so there's no question about it. They need the assistance of a market that can pay for stuff. Although we sometimes get the impression they're gouging pretty deep to make their money back. So, is it a big conversation? Yeah, it's a serious conversation. There's a lot going on there. But we all have to just do the best we can with what we got. But so what's happened is, and I guess I'll find out more about this, is my insurance company is aware that I've been prescribed this medication. They've been covering a lot of it, and it's covered because I'm not taking it for what some people call cosmetic reasons, which I think is an absolute bullshit approach. I don't know if we can change that conversation because a lot of people believe that those of us that have metabolic conditions, metabolic derangement, that live with obesity, that we do this to ourselves. We bring this upon ourselves, that we're to blame. That's kind of the narrative that's been around for a long time. It's still pretty socially acceptable to make fun of people with excess adipose tissue, to make fun of people who live in larger bodies, and to treat them like they're less than normal people. Average body sizes are on the rise, and we live in an obesogenic environment. There's a lot of bullshit going on, and a lot of people just seem to think that we don't take responsibility for ourselves or what we do or how we do it. That is absolute bullshit. The vast majority of those of us that live in a large body have taken so many swipes at trying to control it, and almost every time you bounce back to where you were or worse. It's such a common occurrence, and it isn't a lack of willpower. It isn't a lack of moral qualities. It's none of that. This is something that I don't think will change quickly, but it's something I've spent a lot of time thinking about in the last week because I was very, very privileged to get a chance to speak to a panel of qualified individuals that are going to decide how another medication, I believe it's an SDLT2 inhibitor. Hey, Commander. All right, Commander. I'm glad you're out with your family having a meal at a restaurant. It's always great to get together with family, and I know you spend a lot of time on the road like I do. Welcome. So I got a chance to speak to this panel. I think it's called CADET, and I'm probably mispronouncing it. It's a panel that's going to decide about how Canada deals with making sure people have access to medication. It's other class of medications, and I'm on them. And this one also had an issue at the pharmacy, so it was a massive coincidence, I suppose. But it was also a really good opportunity for me to have this conversation with myself. Really, a lot of times I run through all this stuff in my head before I speak. When I'm speaking to medical professionals about my experiences as a patient, I'm trying to think about what it is that they're trying to decide, what they need to think, I guess, what they need to think about, and how I want them to think about me. And I'm really there as a representative, not of myself, but of a whole group of people, a very large group of people, and those are people that live their lives with the experience of disease. Um, Disease is something that lots of people have touching their lives, whether they're a caregiver or a patient or a healthcare provider. And most healthcare providers are people, and they also have uh, their own set of um, diseases and conditions that they get themselves. Same with researchers. The same with people that work in labs, people that work in administration, people that work in decision making. They're all people, but putting a human face on the people that are actually receiving treatment for a specific thing. You may or may not actually have anyone in the room who's been at the receiving end or cared for a loved one or a friend, family member, what have you. That's also suffering with whatever condition they live with. And so I try to think about that when I speak. I try to think about us as a group. One of the things they wanted to know was like what it's like to live in a rural community, and I live in a rural community where having a car is almost a necessity to get to a place to pick up a drug and to see a healthcare provider, at least the kind that I see any sort of specialist. I have to drive pretty much 25 minutes or so at a minimum, and sometimes it's more. I often will travel with traffic and whatnot, well over an hour away from home to get care. And I live in a pretty populated area, even though it's rural. People that live further north and further out oftentimes have to travel extremely long distances, and many times I know people that live in what would be considered fairly large cities outside of this region where they just don't have access to major big city hospitals without getting on an airplane to travel to really big places like Toronto and London. And that's something that has an impact on getting care. I was glad to be able to talk about that. And yeah, no one is accepting new patients who accept my insurance. I have to pay 100% out of pocket. So Commander is talking about, and Commander, I believe you live in the USA and work in the USA, and I think it's the same thing for that you have insurance based coverage for healthcare as well as for even just getting a diagnosis. Um, Whereas in Canada, it tends to be mostly for the pharmaceuticals. And I was speaking about that too because we pay a tremendous amount in taxes, and I pay a tremendous amount. When I say I have health insurance, I'm working for that health insurance. It's not free. It's not something that's just given to me. A lot of people pretend that it is, but it's not an equal share. So like I'm lucky to have a job, and my wife have a job where healthcare coverage outside of getting a diagnosis is actually covered to some degree. So getting something like physiotherapy or a massage or mental health therapy is something that is basically not paid for by the government funded healthcare plan. A doctor will tell you you need those things, that you need a drug, that you need to see a therapist, that you need to get physiotherapy to recover. But the cost of the things is not covered by the government health plan. Finding out that that's the way to get better is covered. And that's one of the things I was talking about. So I think that's a discussion that's worth having. I think it's always worth talking about where do we stop and start healthcare, and should we actually care for people start to finish? And yeah, Commander's comment is an excellent point. That in the U.S. and I know there's been studies done that show the U.S. could do a healthcare plan as good as or better than what we have in Canada, and the overall cost to the system wouldn't increase. It might even decrease, and people would not all go bankrupt. Um, I think maybe some big health insurance companies would have to really shift what they do, and that would probably not be something they'd want to do. They one industry might have to lose money and adapt. And I was talking to a good friend of mine about how some industries are just going to disappear. That's just the way things go, and employees shouldn't be upset about that. People that work in an industry, they shouldn't worry about the fact that their job is engineered out of existence. They should just figure out how to adapt and roll with the punches. Although he did say something super important to go alongside that, and that was the governments, and which means us. We get so much more out of investments we make into things that provide us with real value. And his suggestion was that not only should government support healthcare for people in a universal way, but education and beyond secondary education, tertiary education and beyond, and also retraining. Retraining not just for people changing jobs, but people staying in a job. If governments gave more incentives to have continuing education for people in all sorts of industries, they would be more valuable people. More money could be made. Um, and yes, so Commander's putting something up here. Whenever we try to let Medicare, people scream communism. Yeah, no, and Commander, um, they're right. The U.S. has a very strange approach to um their capitalist society, I guess, and it's a good thing to have this fantastic capitalist system because it is obviously the best system. Um, and let's see here. For the 1980s, all health insurance companies were not for profit. It cost charities and access care with much lower. Yeah. So yeah, and you know what, Commander, I didn't. I was alive prior to the 1980s, but I was certainly not paying attention to what was going on with health insurance in the U.S. back then. I'm sure it could be researched well, and I know you do a lot of research and know many things. But yeah, cost charities. Yeah, no, and that's really a good thing, right? And they weren't paying some douchebag to admit. But yeah, so yeah, no, and you know what, Commander, I'm sure we could look that up, and the amount of money that someone who's a major person in and in a thing is is not a it's not important. Um, it's not important right now to worry about how much money that person makes. It's the fact that the most important thing they do is make money, and that costs charity, like you say, where you're just trying to get the job done, just to make sure people have healthcare, that they have access to it. Um, that that's something we need to remember. And I remember when I was a young kid, I actually remember Blue Cross and Blue Shield and all these types of things, all these little insurance, not they're that little, but like all these insurance companies constantly had little pamphlets at like the grocery store, the drugstore, whatever that you could pick up, so you could get additional insurance on top of what you already had covered, and travel insurance and stuff like that. And you could just sign up for it. And I guess they wanted to just get everyone in the world to sign up, and in the US, it's not something that happens all the time. Oh, okay, so really, if you live in Israel for 5 years, they'll give you a free bachelor's degree. You have to do the study and earn it with the academics that they will pay your tuition. Okay. Um, you have to be okay. You have to have okay. So you have to be Jewish ancestry. So that's interesting because of course, I mean, I don't know what all the motivations of the Israeli government are, but I'm sure they want to have people that are part of their culture living in their country. I don't know if that's the type of thing that like really jives with the way I think about the way things ought to be. I have absolutely nothing against Jewish culture or Jewish people. They're actually many of the people that I've met from that culture are some of the best people I've met. But I think the idea that we try to keep people separated by culture, it has caused problems in the past. And I'm not going to go down this road because it's a big road with a lot going on. But the total destruction of people's lives on a daily basis in some regions based on extremely minor differences that we have culturally, religiously, um, just politically, and all that stuff together, and slight differences in skin tone, in language, dialect, you name it. None of these things are actually worth. They're not worth having a conversation about or worrying about, and they're certainly not worth killing each other over. Um, and so I worry when you say that you have to have this particular um, background by blood, right? Having that sort of thing happen. But like you say, Commander, it is absolutely fantastic that the government will help pay for your education. The idea that you have to have a certain bloodline to get it is a little bit troublesome. I think if we took that same statement out of Israel, I think like if someone said, well, you can get a higher education in Canada, and it's paid for, and there are actually some programs for people, um, and I don't know how they work, but I know there are some programs to help people that are indigenous peoples get an education. But I think at this point, that's just trying to make up for so many past wrongs and so many lack of access to resources they've had instilled by stupid programs in our government for decades or even centuries at this point, going back to long before we had a country and a government. That stuff is mired in absolute just travesty piled upon travesty. So I'm not complaining about that at all. I think, trying to help level the playing field by giving people a leg up when they've been pushed down so long is not as troublesome. Um, but yeah, high performing students from other countries allowed to study there as okay, that's great to hear, Commander. Like, I'm not saying it's bad. It does feel it just when you say that they have to have a Jewish mother to get this education, it sort of feels like something. I think I'm not necessarily right about this, but I think if I were to say in Canada that like you have to have a Scottish last name to get a higher education, people would be up in arms about that. For instance, it's just a thought that I think if you had the same kind of thing, and I only throw that out because lots of Scottish people are a big group of white settlers that came a few generations ago to the part of the world I live in. Doesn't really mean anything. Do they have any right to anything specifically? No, but when you talk about countries in the Middle East, there's so much baggage with that that it's really hard to parse out what's a good way to do things. We should subsidize education for people understand. Yeah, yeah, no, and I agree, Commander. And I didn't think you were saying that it was. Just to be clear, I wasn't actually saying that we'd be better off if they didn't do it at all. I just think, and I think like you, that they should subsidize education for everybody. And I think like right now in my country, you can get a secondary education, so like high school up to grade 12, is covered by tax dollars. And there are some programs and things to help students that really perform well at athletics or academics to get here and there into a university. um yeah, okay, Israeli citizenship. um yeah, so it looks like commander's clarifying some of what's been said, and I think if we delved into it we might find that it's a far more equal playing field than it seems like. um But yeah, college up to a bachelor's degree, yeah, it should be free. But and what my friend was saying, and I think this is really interesting because I'm not a person with a lot of formal education, and I'm not putting formal education down. You can make a good life for yourself without a formal education, but you can't make a good life for yourself with no education. And what I mean by that is that you have to have knowledge and skills at something. Anyone that tells you that they totally made it with nothing is lying to you. They had something. What it is may not be what we traditionally think of as the building blocks for a great life. But what we traditionally think of as the building blocks for a great life aren't they're not actually that sort of thing. They're not a guaranteed path. I always think of this quote, and I was watching another program earlier, and I said this quote in the side chat, and it was completely unrelated to most of the conversations I have. It was about motorcycling, and the person there was saying, sort of defending billionaires for having lots of money and lots of cars and stuff, and that if people would just stop complaining about that and work really hard, they'd maybe get something too. Um, and it reminded me of this quote, and I always forget the name of the person that said it, and I have to look it up. But this person was really really insightful when they said this. They said, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact words, but very much along the lines of, if hard work and ingenuity were the path to success, every woman in Africa would be a goddamn millionaire. And that's true. That show me, and it doesn't just apply to women in Africa; it applies to people around the world. There are a small number of people that sit around and do fuck all. I don't know very many people like that. And to be honest, the only people I know who, for whatever reason, aren't able to get up and leave the house and do this, that, and the other, have extremely good reasons for it. They've been severely injured. They have some sort of disability. They have all sorts of things standing in the way of them doing the traditional 9 to 5 job. And the traditional 9 to 5 job is bullshit anyway. That's not something we should strive for. Lots of people are making great contributions, and to pretend that the person who is working outside the home is less than or more than someone else is nonsense. Just like everything, the person who's raising their child that has taken time off to care for a sick relative or friend, who's retired. Are they lazy after working for 45 years in a career, paying into a pension plan that whole time? Are they a terrible person? Like we seem to get mad at people for having things they worked really hard for. Um, and I think we should be pulling each other up instead of pushing each other down. And if anybody needs to be torn down, it's people that hoard wealth. People that hoard wealth are not contributing to the economy. And anecdotally, we hear that some of those people aren't very good at paying their employees. I don't think that's the norm, though, and it's very difficult to see how all of economics works. And I was listening to an economics program this morning, had me thinking about that. Is how do we get the maximum benefit from our society and our economy? And I don't know the answers to that. I'm just a truck driver, but I look around. Most of the truck driving I do is business to business. So, because most people don't own really big construction and mining equipment and the like, right? That's not something most people own personally. Even the people that I haul it for, that quote unquote own it, they don't actually own it. They work for a company that has it, or they may own the company that owns it, but a business owns it, and a business sells it to them. So it may seem to them, and businesses hire them to do stuff, right? Businesses want to build things. Businesses are employed to put together buildings, to run quarries, to run mineral extraction organization, like companies that do that. Um, Minerals are broken down and shipped, whether they're bulk aggregates for road building, whether they're precious minerals, whether it's gold, whether it's oil. Out west, there's a lot of oil field work. I don't do a lot of that, but it's a big part of the industry I'm in. And a lot of times, the equipment we're hauling is coming out of a company that sells equipment only to other companies. It makes me think about, do they see who's actually paying those bills? It probably seems to them like, well, I do up an invoice for fixing this machine or selling this machine. It's paid for by business X. Business A sells it to business X. But the fact of the matter is, citizen Y, citizen B, at some point is working there, and they and their families are paying the bills for everything that's built. So you can pretend that companies are paying for the roads. You pretend that companies are paying for the machines. You pretend that companies and governments are paying for everything. But none of that money came to their hands if it didn't first get pushed up from people who are regular working people in society. That's where all that money comes from. Every dollar that's in the public system has to be earned in the private system first. And most of the way that it gets there is by people working their asses off really hard and then sending a bunch of that money to the government. And we're taxed on everything we earn. We're taxed on everything we save. We're taxed on everything we spend. And we're taxed when we die. And when we're born, they take down all our information so they can make sure they get taxes out of us the whole time. There's nothing wrong with that. If the tax money is used carefully and thought of as a precious resource, and we think of ourselves and our time as a precious resource, then we're doing ourselves a good service. We're looking after ourselves. And when we have healthcare issues and we live with some sort of disease, some sort of comorbidity, some sort of situation like the one I find myself in every day, I have to think about how are the dollars going to make it to the system so that I can be properly cared for. But we don't seem to live in a world where we're resource poor. We don't seem to live in a world where we're cash poor. People talk about wealth distribution being a problem. And if you travel to other countries outside of what we'll call the developed countries in the West, you see people living a lower standard of life in a lot of ways. And they don't have less stress. Everybody could say, well, it's way more stressful to work in the Western world. And I've heard people say that, like it's more stressful to be in a leadership position. Well, yeah, it is. It is actually more stressful. I left a leadership position specifically to make sure that I could lessen my stress. It's one of the most important things to me is to have less stress. It's what I'm all about these days because stress is not good for my health. It's not good for anyone's health. But a lot of people are stressing themselves out all day, every day, including myself, just to earn a living. And I spend my time when I'm not just working, I spend my time thinking about how to improve the world, how to leave it better than I found it. And when I had my own business to look after, I never had time to think about anything except that business, getting home, getting some rest, and getting back at the door. And it may seem some days like, I wake up early, I go, I drive, and I do my job, I get stuff moved around. But at the end of the day, the responsibility for anything other than pickup and delivery and maintenance and well-being of the equipment while it's in my care is not my problem. And that lack of stress has allowed me to use my brain to think about a few other things. And my brain is messed up. I go on tangents all the time. I would have realized more than anything is that I have a capacity to empathize with my fellow person, my fellow human being, because we've all got shit to deal with. We all have difficulties and stresses in our lives. And I've had a lot of them come up in the last week that remind me of just how crazy life can get. But I've also had a chance to think about what's important. And I don't know if I don't know if people watch my lives back and find anything good in them. And I've been doing some goofy stuff recently. If you want to watch shorter videos where I make fun of crazy ideas people have, they're there. Is that very charitable or empathetic on my part? No, it's not. I'm not being very charitable to people who are not very charitable themselves, I guess. People that are terrorizing children to exercise quote unquote demons from them. People that are trying to sell their brand of Christianity by accosting people in the street and trying to get them to have well reasoned conversations, spur of the moment in front of a camera. And other garbage people like that, people that are treating people terribly because of things they have no control over, like their gender, their sexual orientation, their skin color, their religion, their background, their culture, their country of birth. Yeah, if you're upset with people for that, and also the constant claims of persecution when people tell people that they're right to practice their religion and be bigoted pieces of shit ends when they're being hateful and disruptful to someone else's life. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's just something you're gonna have to live with. You can't always just be a piece of shit. So yeah, I've made fun of some people. I'll probably continue to do it. I find my brain is going down tiny little rabbit holes. I'm rethinking lyrics to songs, making fun of crazy ideas people come up with. Do I think anyone's possessed by a demon? Fuck no. Do I think that people are traumatized by having demons exorcised out of them? Fuck yeah. Yeah, especially young children. This is fucked up. Don't terrorize young children by pretending there's a demon in them to sell more tickets to your show. And it's a show. Don't pretend that it isn't. There's lots of people who are extremely pious, religious, whatever, who live their whole lives without ever doing a weird show in a tent. There's no need for that. But I bet it brings in the dollars. When you sell absolutely nothing to people, it's pretty easy to like bring people in. All you have to do is have a seat in a field somewhere or in a conference hall or in some sort of a building. And at a certain point, you're going to have so much money, you can build a building, see them all over. I think we could do better. And when I see people that are obviously in it for the cash, who are basically the bottom of the barrel, is, not not salespeople. A good salesperson is trying to get you the product you need delivered in a great way. I've worked with lots of tremendous salespeople, and those people are actually agents, right? They're an agent trying to get a decent deal put together for everybody. They're not trying to sell garbage um, to make as much money as possible and walk away. They're trying to retain long term customers, to build relationships with customers. That type of salesperson is not who I'm talking about. The person who's selling a pyramid scheme, the person who's selling an eternity of salvation from a place that doesn't exist, and protection from a deity that doesn't exist. If they do, I mean, what are the chances they've struck on the right one? Like, slim to none. Are these good arguments against religion? No, they're not. I mean, some religion's got to be true. I mean, why it's not the one that was there before God ever came along? Beyond me. Um, but it really seems like money is the motivating factor for all these things. The money's the motivating factor for not supporting a system that provides universal health care. Money seems to be the reason why hate preachers, exorcism preachers, and other sort of just money grubbing douchebags are all over the place grabbing cash and hoarding it. Doesn't seem good. And when really huge corporations hoard huge amounts of cash and become worth billions and billions of dollars, we're just, we're over the fucking moon with how much money they have versus how much everyone else actually makes working for them or working for providers to them. There's nothing wrong with making a lot of money. There's nothing wrong with being exceedingly rich. I'm not fighting against that, but when the money is hoarded to this huge level, like to win capitalism, and people can't afford to live their lives, people can't afford shelter and food and basic health care for them and their families. There's a fucking problem. When people work full time and don't have enough money to make ends meet, there's a big fucking problem. And I know that's an unpopular take. I sound like a fucking communist when I say that capitalism isn't good if some people can't make their fucking ends meet, if they're working every fucking hour of the day and they can't fucking pay the bills. And you can say they're living beyond their means. Well, I'm not talking about people that are living beyond their means. I'm talking about people that are just barely fucking living. And yes, Commander, Banana Man, I've done a special song for the Banana Man, Ray Comfort. I know some people mispronounce his last name, but I would never do that. That would be really crass. But yes, there's a song about Banana Man. I now have a song about demon exorcisms. And I don't even know what the other one is I did. Oh, I did a rap about Roger, Mudfossil Roger. Mudfossil Roger is just a crazy person. I shouldn't make fun of those folks. But I did. Anyway, that is what it is. I'm gonna end my stream now because I think my wife's home. I'm gonna go see her, and I'm gonna go hang out with my family. Probably listen to some more people talk on the YouTube today. That's my piece. That's what I want to say. I want to say I love everyone out there. There's a lot of hardworking people out there doing the best they can. And Commander, thanks for listening live. And if anybody is coming in the future, I know Commander must subscribe to me because Commander's always here, and they are subscribed to them. If you're not subscribed, they make some pretty cool videos, and their quality is high. They're really good at computer animations, computer graphics, and putting in all sorts of cool voices and researching all sorts of neat stuff and making fun and tearing a strip off of people that deserve a strip torn off of them and making us look at things from another angle. So Commander, I thank you for that. I'm glad you were here in my chat live, and thank you. And I know I didn't advertise this. I didn't say I was going to be here or any of that. So it is what it is. I do want to thank everybody that watches. Lick the like button, comment, subscribe, do any of that good stuff if you want to. I think that's what I'm supposed to say. But the bottom line is appreciate everyone. Even if you don't like what I say, you want to have like a conversation, in the comment section, or even talk to me online about what I've got wrong. Let's have a conversation. My mind's open. I'm open to new ideas. I'm open to learning about new things, about the way people live their lives that's different from mine. It doesn't make it wrong, it makes it different. And I do think there's a difference between right and wrong, and there's a line somewhere. I'm willing to change where that is. I'm willing to understand that not everyone's values are the same as mine, but I do value human life and human. People talk about human flourishing, and I guess flourishing would be really good, but I think just not feeling dead and tired and worn down and stressed out 100% of the time, it's not a bad thing to aim for. And I think having basic shelter, food, and healthcare, also not really a communist take, but maybe we have a little bit more than that, just a little bit more. Does that make me a capitalist? Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, Commander, thank you so much. And yeah, oh, you're welcome. Yes, yes, and I'm really glad you're here. I'm always glad when I'm often on the road when I listen to what you say, and then I realize there's a cartoon to go with it, and I stop and rewatch it again when I get a minute because the animations are fantastic. So, go check out Commander 401. They have a great channel and great stuff. And yeah, it's awesome. All right. Have a great Sunday, everyone. Sure, I'll see some people out there commenting and looking and subscribing and all that stuff in other places. So thank you so much.